Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you your judge, executioner, jailer, executioner, bailiff, executioner, lawyer, executioner, and if necessary, your executioner, and then the inspector for said execution. Akoya Seishu. Now, with Akoya, we already know we're dealing with one of the most craziest characters in Kengan Ashura. In fact, he's been named to be crazier more times than any character, even Setsuna. One thing that we can never take away from Akoya is that he is one of the few characters in the series who canonically clap cheeks. And very early, mind you, I think he's one of the first, actually. And yes, I'm talking about Hiyama. I did not know her actual name was Shunka. So there's something new for you. Anyways, let's give it up for the captain of the 44th Riot Squad, the Kengan Department of Defense, the man with a forearm stronger than Quagmire, the man who canonically choked out and stuffed Cosmo, the marionette of Kengan, who earned the respect of Gozo Moribuchi, the bringer of justice, the man who tanked a fucking explosion, the man who will set it right, Akoya Seishu. Now, man, with Akoya, I gotta tell you, this man's getting that Stockholm syndrome, okay? He got that Stockholm on lock with Hiyama. I'm sorry. There's no other way of me saying it. There's a term that we use sometimes. It's like, say, oh, we got it on lock, he got it on straps, wifed up and everything. No, he got that on Stockholm. But no, derangedness aside, remember in my Setsuna video, I told you guys see the world in Setsuna's point of view. Do not see the world in Akoya's point of view, because it's just wrong. There's no other way of saying it where it actually could be right in Akoya's point of view. It's just wrong. The fact that this man Akoya will literally kill you just for being related, like for example, if your third cousin was like someone who stole candy from a baby or something like that, Akoya will come hunt you down because you're related to him. You're gonna wake up one morning with a forearm down to your neck just because Akoya found out that you're related to some guy probably states light years away, and this man said, you know what, you have a seed of evil within you, and that's why you must die for the sake of justice. Of course, it's all for justice when it comes to Akoya. And that's the thing, even Akoya knows that what he's doing is wrong. He knows that he's a murderer. He knows that he's going around killing people. So he himself is not at all exempt from his own justice, which makes it very interesting in my opinion, because this lets us know that Akoya is going around killing all of these people that he deems to be evil, but he knows at the end of the day, there will come a time where he too has to condemn himself. And I ain't gonna lie, I feel like there's some kind of philosophical, no, that's psychotic. What is good, y'all sink here? And today we're gonna talk about Akoya Seishu. Now, in this video, we're going to cover Akoya, how he fits into the story, his character development, personality, everything like that. And we're going to break it down to a place that's very digestible for you guys. So, with that being said, take a seat, relax, sit down, and let's go ahead and get started with his character design. So, when it comes to Akoya's character design, he is modeled a lot after Rorschach and the Punisher. So with Rorschach, that's where he gets his moral compass and how he views evil. And the Punisher is where you see when Akoya uses suits, the Punisher uses all those weapons and gadgets and everything like that in order to fight people. That's what Akoya uses. Now, both of them combined have the set hatred for all things that are bad, all things evil. The Punisher hates that shit. Rorschach hates that shit. And both of them will enact their own vigilante style in order to, executing justice in their way. But because they act in this manner, Akoya does so as well. And it's not just when he's wearing the suit, he's always like this. I'm pretty sure that Sanjo did not just write Akoya to be, the abuser that he is, but he does write Akoya as being someone who sees everyone who is evil as, disposable. People who should be removed from the world, because he is looking for they're trying to create a world free of all evil, including himself. It's a really weird mindset to have, and I'm still surprised at how he got the inspector role that he did inside the Japanese police force, which kind of says a lot about this world, considering that Ichika was also an inspector before she went to the juvenile detention center in Psychic Rich. But anyways, I'm getting off rails. Let's go ahead and talk about Akoya's background, because It is not necessarily his background that we get, but Hiyama's background. It is a very different background compared to all the other fighters because we're looking at it from someone else's point of view. We don't really get inside of Akoya's head too much because we don't think that there's that much in there. All that's in his head is that there is evil in the world, I must eliminate it, therefore I must execute justice. So let's go ahead and talk about where that actually came from Hiyama's point of view. So this is probably one of the most wicked backstories out of all the characters. You know that Akoya goes through and wears that raid suit and that bulletproof suit that he wears and goes on these one-man raids in order to enact his version of justice. Now, to Akoya, evil is evil. If you're related to someone who committed a crime, then you're evil by association. You have a seed of evil within you, and he is there to eliminate you because you have that seed. He's going to pluck that seed out of your heart and then crush it. In the confession side story, follow Hiyama during her therapy session, and she is talking about the story about how she actually inherited the Wakasa life insurance company. So her cousin, Kento, actually murdered her father and her uncle so that Kento would then be the vice president to Hiyama, where Hiyama would then be the president. So Kento's plan was this. After a year of Hiyama being president, he was then going to kill her, which he almost succeeded in. And so after a year of them, working under the company and everything like that, that's when Kento decided, you know what, it's time to do it. And he tried to strangle, and he strangled Hiyama. Now, while he was strangling her, as a bit of a side note, I don't know why they're dressed like this. I don't know why she's dressed in a nightgown. I don't know why he's shirtless. They are cousins, unless you're talking about some Sweet Home Alabama. Anyways, that's when Akoya grabbed Kento's head and just ripped it like a grape. Just ripped it off like a grape, bro. I think he either ripped it off or twisted. I can't really tell from the artwork, but in my head, I imagine that he just grabbed the top of his head and say, then really just like ripped his whole head off his neck. Anyways, that's when Hiyama fell in love with Akoya. Now, it's never explained why Akoya initially didn't kill Hiyama, because if Akoya actually knew that, Hiyama's cousin was the one that was trying to kill her, then theoretically, Akoya would have killed Hiyama immediately as well. My only thought about this is that Akoya actually does have feelings for Hiyama, and that's the reason why he didn't kill her on sight. It's because he actually does have like romantic feelings for her. That would probably be the only reason for him not killing her on the spot once he found out that her cousin was a murderer. So she then goes on and explains how some of the deaths that were actually taking place around the Kengan Association were actually because Akoya was going around killing people left and right. Yes, these are bad people that he was killing. I think he killed a guy who was murking people off and taking their life insurance money. And then you have the story that was actually from Akoya's backstory. Now, it was during this story that he saved a college student that initially robbed a car of a mafia don, and the kid caused a hit and run afterwards. Now, eventually the don did put a hit on him and his friend, and the executioner that was sent was Mamoru Sanzo, who was a sadist who was very inhumane with his ways of killing people. I believe he drilled, took one of those little drills to his friend's head and just watched him die after that or anything like that. Anyways, Akoya then showed up and ripped Mamoru's throat out and crushed it. Anyways, that's when Akoya then turned to the student and handed him a gun and said, all right, man, if you can kill me, I'll let you go. It's so the reason that he was actually going to kill the kid was because, as he mentioned before, the kid did commit evil. He stole from somebody. Therefore, he's bad. He's evil. He has to go. He has to be eliminated. At least that's how Akoya sees it. And so the boy thought he was actually going to be safe because, you know what? He tried to tell Akoya, hey, man, why you trying to go for me? Why don't you go for the Don instead? Why don't you go for him? He's the one that's, causing all these problems. And Akoya probably laughing at him inside that smirk. And Akoya's probably laughing at him inside that suit saying, I already did. And boy, did he, man. Akoya, I ain't gonna lie, this is probably one of the most gruesome killings in Ashura, but Akoya slaughtered the Don and the entire mafia, then hung them by their feet, cut off their heads, and then had their arms like this so that it was literally, so that their arms were literally carrying the severed heads. It's very disgusting and it's very badass of him to have done this. But it does make a statement where if anyone were to see that, you would know that the person who's doing this is just a deranged individual. And who do you think is actually inspecting these murders? Akoya. You see that right there? This man has everything planned out. He can literally commit the most heinous and gruesome crimes imaginable, or rather the most heinous and gruesome killings imaginable. And he's the one that has to inspect it because he is the chief investigator. This is probably the craziest thing about Akoya because he is the one who's inspecting his own murders, and then the people who are probably dying, Hiyama's raking in their life insurance money. Bro, they found the cheat code. And if you're wondering what happened to the therapist after Hiyama was telling him all this, Akoya then showed up, killed him, then killed his employer because the therapist was actually out to get dirt on Hiyama because they were suspecting the life insurance company of having someone, or rather multiple people being killed. This is a flawless play that they have here. And personally, I don't know how to make money in insurance companies, but I'm pretty sure there's got to be some way that she can like finesse something out of this, bro. They got something, well, bad, but good monetarily wise they can have working for them. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about Akoya's personality. So although he kills in the name of justice, it doesn't change the fact that Akoya sees himself as a murderer. In fact, because he knows he's murdering evil, he plans on killing himself once all the murders are done. And so this is really, it's a disgusting point of view in my opinion. In fact, in anyone's opinion, it's a disgusting point of view because he goes about this, like his version of justice, in such a vigilante way that, Adam calls it the Dirty Harry syndrome, which is where a police officer is reckless, disregards practices and policies, and uses excessive force and vigilantism in order to get the job done in their eyes. And so with Akoya, that is exactly it. He doesn't have much of a personality except for Hiyama and Ryuki, or rather he used to when Ryuki was still unstable. See, back then in the early days of Omega, Ryuki and Akoya, they were best of friendos, bro. And when Ryuki also linked up with Setsuna, and then Setsuna and Akoya linked up, they are the three musketeers of mental instability right there. Eventually Ryuki does grow out of it, but we'll talk about that a little bit more when we go over to Omega. Now, going back to Akoya's personality, ain't not much there, bro. This man just follows the orders of Hiyama, and the moment that Hiyama starts, not providing the results he's after, that's when he starts going batshit crazy and will just kill people on the spot. He has a very if this, then that kind of behavior, where he's not exactly always angry, he's not exactly sad, he is just strict, he's stern. He has that strong sense of justice in his eyes, and he is always looking to execute it. Now, if there's ever a person that he's like talking to and he already deems him evil, like when he was talking to Nicholas, he was looking at him and said, yo, I'm going to execute justice on you, and I'm going to end your lineage. Goodbye. He was not looking to talk. He's not much of a talker at all in the series. Like, when I'm saying that he is not a talker, Karo's not a talker. And Karo's a nice guy. But Akoya's not a talker in the sense that he is not a nice guy. He's not a bad guy either. He's just crazy. He's just crazy. The whole concept of a thought process doesn't actually happen in Akoya's head. In fact, it's even said in the manga itself that Akoya doesn't actually think. He skips the entire thought process. You know, when people get like, a preconception and then they have a thought and then they do an action. No, it's just signal, boom, already gone to an action. Didn't even make a thought. That's the way that Akoya thinks. He acts based off of the signal that Hiyama gives him in order to fight. So I'm going to go over to his fighting style now because that's really the best way we can explain Akoya's personality here. So the key to Akoya's fighting style is mostly his reflexes. The only way that Hiyama and Akoya's style of fighting works is because Akoya has an inhumanely fast reaction speed. I believe it's like a 0.075 in Ashura and a 0.074 in Omega, unless it was a typo. But outside of his absurdly fast reaction speed, he and Hiyama fight utilizing Hiyama's ability to analyze a fighter's intervals, or rather the moment when a fighter is the most vulnerable. So she uses like an internal clock to analyze a person's pattern and then sends Akoya signals that match the pattern. So she's essentially telling Akoya, hey, at this moment, right here, right now, they're vulnerable. Attack. And the moment that she says attack or whatever the attack is, Akoya's already doing it faster than anyone can ever react to it. And so this pairs very well with his normal fighting style of Taiho Jutsu, which is a fighting style that was developed for Japanese police officers to restrain or neutralize their opponents. So Taiho Jutsu is a mixed martial arts based off of Japanese Kenpo, Kendo, and Bojutsu. Because of this, it uses a variety of weapons, which is kind of like how Akoya fights. He is one of the few characters in the series that uses multiple different weapons. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I see him show up randomly with a sword, but he's mostly used like using his forearm as like a shield and his other arm like it's like a big ass fist, is like a battering ram. Not a battering ram, it's like a baton, and like whacking people down, like he's holding it up with the fist and saying, get down, against whoever he's fighting. I remember he slammed his forearm into Cosmo's mouth and then was just like hammering away with his thumb, like pinching his ribs and snapping them. Then when he was against Ryuki, he put his forearm up, slammed it down onto Ryuki, and then just started wailing on him as if he was like hitting him with a baton. So yes, he fights in a very Riot Gear-esque style of fighting. So Akoya's forearm is probably the strongest thing about him, is why his defense is as really good as it is. So it's even able to withstand a full-bodied attack from Haro, even when he was in the Indra form. And so this is a really, really, really strong arm, bro. The other style of fighting that we know Akoya using is Ripper. Now, this is where he takes his knuckle bones and then rotates his wrists in order to create like shallow cuts along a person, tearing off some skin. It's kind of like Razor's Edge, where he's able to like nip off some skin from a person, but it's not really as damaging as Lihito's Razor Edge. It's just more so like an harassment, kind of like the Tiger Nico's Leech. So the other move that he uses is the stance of suppression. Now, this is the stance that he got after watching Kanoh fight Okubo. And it's tailor-made for Akoya to follow whatever orders Hiyama gives him. And that's kind of the basis for it. I mean, Akoya did try to use this move when he was fighting Ryuki at a point, and it was a little bit successful. Not a little bit successful, I mean like very successful actually, considering that he did win that fight against Ryuki, but we'll get into that later. But the point is that this like defensive fighting style that Akoya uses is very beneficial for him because he's able to just simply react to whatever his opponent does. He stands with a very calm, composed face whenever someone is going against him, and the moment they come to him, he blocks it and then boom, wails on them immediately because he has that really fast reaction speed. Then of course you gotta factor in his batshit crazy fighting tactics, you know, the biting, the headbutts, or rather any means necessary in order to beat someone up, or rather execute justice in his way. This isn't really a fighting style, this is just him really just trying to execute justice and get someone off the face of the earth. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about his fights then. First match is going to be against Haro. This is probably his most tame match in the entire series because he was actually following Hiyama's orders throughout the most part of it. Now, during this time, he was really just playing defensively until Hiyama can gather enough data on Haro's movements, and then she can start giving him the signals on how to move. So once her analysis was complete, he started bodying him. Like, it wasn't even a close fight. It looked like he was just executing Haro in less than 0.25 seconds. But when Haro had that little revert back into the avatar of Indra, Akoya, he was cooked. Okay, for lack of a better term, he was cooked. Really, the only thing that did save Akoya while Hiyama was still trying to get her calculations back online was that he took action and Haro's knees did not know how to handle that action. And so he won because he took out Haro's knees and then kind of bodied him afterwards. And after the match, though, that's when he told Hiyama, you know, he gave her I'm not going to say what he did to her because I don't condone it, of course, but he then told her in a very stern way, don't let it happen again, Hiyama, or else, or something like that. Who knows? But this does make something a little bit interesting. You see, I feel like the reason that Akoya actually did hit Hiyama is because he knows that in his mind he's going to execute justice upon her eventually. So I don't know if he actually does value human life that much if they're already evil. Because Akoya wants to get rid of all people that are evil, including himself. So wouldn't that also include like some kind of a self-harm, or rather when he hurts Hiyama does. I'm trying to like wrap my mind around it. Like it hurts my brain having to think this way, but I really feel like he does it not because like abusive and that's what he likes to do or anything like that. It's because to him he's just executing justice still, but in a minimal way. I It's really hard for me to gauge this, but let's move on to the next fight. So we go on to the next match where he's then against Imai Cosmo. Now, in this match, he does the exact same thing where he's listening to Hiyama's orders initially, but then Adam and Nishihonji then show up and break up their little strategy. That's when Akoya goes berserk because now Hiyama is no longer able to contain Akoya. She's no longer to puppeteer him like a marionette. And so at this point, Akoya thinks to himself, you know what? I'm just going to go for the kill. Or rather, you know what? I'm just going to go execute justice. And so he starts going in on Cosmo in a very relentless manner. It was a way that freaked out everyone in the stadium because people have seen Akoya fight before, but they're used to the Akoya that was fighting with Hiyama giving him the orders on how to fight and everything like that. Now they're actually seeing Akoya as Akoya, the vigilante Akoya, the Akoya who's literally lopping off heads. This type of Akoya is the one that the people are seeing, and Cosmo is in the pit with this monster who is literally biting him. He bit off Cosmo's leg and then chewed it in front of everyone, then spat it out. I'm still reeling from this scene, and I just read it. Anyways, after he pinned down Cosmo violently and started beating down on him, breaking his ribs, snapping them one by one, that's when Cosmo got his Super Saiyan power up, got the flashback and then the power of will, yada, yada, yada. But even then, Akoya was not going to let that happen immediately. He just wasn't going to let him win so easily. Like, Cosmo really did have to work for this win. And even afterwards, Akoya barely took any damage after the fact. So realistically, Cosmo just got pushed forward because of plot, in my opinion. But realistically, you know that Cosmo was a better fighter than Akoya. If Akoya did apply himself and wasn't as crazy, could he have beaten Cosmo? We don't know, man. That wouldn't be Akoya at that point. It'd be somebody else. Anyways, let's go on to Omega. So about half a year after the Annihilation Tournament, Gozo and Akoya actually had a match with each other. And in this match, Akoya nearly killed Gozo. Now, that wasn't going to stop Gozo Moribuchi because Moribuchi is really, really durable, okay, man? This man, even while he was healing up on the hospital bed, he was in recovery, he's in physical therapy, he told Kazi, you know what, that guy Akoya, he cool people, man. He almost killed me, but he cool people, man. And so when he encounters Ryuki for the first time, he could tell that Ryuki had killed many people, although it wasn't for his own personal reason. I believe this is because Akoya has this kind of unique sense of determining who a killer is after having killed so many people himself. And so during his match with Ryuki, he was a lot more patient than he was with everyone else. And he wanted to test Ryuki to see, if he was really a bad killer or a good killer, if that makes sense. Nothing with Akoya makes sense to me, of course. But despite beating Ryuki as bad as he did, the only reason that Akoya actually won, quote unquote, is because Ryuki hesitated, because Koga gave him that little bit of a hesitation. And then Akoya got on him about it after the fight. He was like, yo, why did you hesitate? You could have killed me right then and there. What's wrong with you? But that's when Akoya then realized that Ryuki really was going for the kill. Ryuki really was about that action. Ryuki really was about that smoke. It was at that moment that Akoya knew for the first time in a long time, I got a friend. I finally have somebody who can share my level of justice with. He found somebody he could pass down the throne to. At least that's what we thought initially. We thought that Ryuki was going to follow in the footsteps of Akoya and then become another vigilante to work alongside him. But that is unfortunately wasn't the case. In fact, he did work alongside Akoya later on, but we'll talk about that later. What we are going to talk about now, though, is Akoya versus Nicholas Labanner. Now, Nicholas, this fight was probably the absolute worst matchup for Akoya because if Nicholas ever touches you, then he's going to touch you in a... Wow. If Nicholas can touch you, then he can temporarily paralyze your nerves. And this turned out to be very bad for Akoya, where eventually he managed to lose the entire feeling of one of his arms, he lost a feeling in his leg, and even his heart, he lost a feeling in his heart. And so the match, once Akoya just shrugged off the whole not being able to feel his body parts and just started wailing on Nicholas with headbutts, biting him, it got really, really bloody, really, really fast. And the match did get out of hand to the point where they were just going to keep going at it with each other until one of them eventually killed the other person, until Lo Long stopped in and stopped them both. And then, you know, they had that one little scene where freaking Lejito and Carlos were holding them back. Yeah, Lejito holding up Akoya and said, Carlos saying, hold them back for me. And then you go, bing, 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 and knocked him out. I gotta give it to Carlos on that one. This man knocked out Akoya with the swift strikes. But after this encounter with purgatory matches and all the worm that nonsense that took place with it, Akoya then made it his duty to take out the worm along with the Westward faction by any means necessary because he deemed them to be evil. Now, this is where we get the worm execution team, where we have Akoya, Setsuna, and Ryuki. Or rather, as I call them, the three musketeers of instability. And so this is where Akoya used his traditional raid suit this time in order to perform this raid, where they were actually targeting some of the, lingering, when they were targeting some of the lingering worm members like Lucian. Now, Lucian still managed to deal some damage to Akoya during their squabble, and looking back at it, it made Akoya actually look weaker because Lucian was already weakened from his fight with Kanoh, and Akoya still struggled to beat him. And Akoya had on the raid suit. So then the question was always asked, like, well, is Akoya weaker without the suit? Is Akoya weaker with the suit? Is he stronger without the suit? We don't fully know. But then we have his match with William Wu, or rather, this is when Akoya and Setsuna try to get the jump onto the Tiger Nico. And so initially the plan was this: Setsuna was going to jump the Tiger Nico, and then Akoya shows up out of nowhere, goes in for the kill with the weapon. But that's when William and Gilbert Wu show up just eating food, drinking, like they're at some kind of a dinner or anything like that, just chilling. Like they're literally sitting there looking at him behind them, chilling, smoking a cigar, laughing and everything. And then Akoya, having his upgraded suit as well at the time, then tried to fight both William and Gilbert. They laughed at him. In fact, William exposed Akoya, and Gilbert exposed Akoya even more because after they realized that we couldn't exactly break the suit that Akoya was wearing because it was just so freaking strong, Gilbert set it on fire. And so Akoya had two options. He was either going to suffocate or just burn to death. And so, of course, he abandoned the suit at that point. And then that's when the fight really began, because now it was just a regular William versus Akoya, where initially you would think that William would win because, William got that Superman syndrome on top of 100% Guihan. But this is Akoya we talking about here, bro. This man wasn't just going to sit around and get bodied left and right by some Wu Clan member. Nah. Even when William was still bodying Akoya, Akoya kept getting back up, and he actually got stronger while they were fighting each other. So eventually he got the upper hand on William and then got a stun gun off on him. So after he stunned William, he then ran into the other room, brought a grenade, freaking blew up the building, grabbed Setsuna and got the fuck out of there. He blew up the building with the Tiger Nico, Gilbert Wu, and William Wu all still inside of it. Then grabbed Setsuna, dragged them back, and he said, I gotta set it right. And we don't exactly know where Akoya is now, but what we do know is that he did drop off Setsuna at a place where Hiyama can pick him up later, and then Hiyama took Setsuna to the hospital. We don't know where Akoya is now. For all we know, Akoya is probably just resting. He's in a hyperbolic time chamber. He's like practicing his how to enact justice or something like that. He is planning something. Akoya is planning something, and I'm telling you, man, he's gonna write some kind of a manuscript. He's gonna hand it over to Kazi and says, I want you to hold on to this because that's all the information I have, or some kind of nonsense that Akoya might come up with. We don't know exactly. But what we do know is that eventually he will go full rogue, and I'm all for it. In conclusion, Akoya is a character who is really, really crazy, but there isn't really a morally good side to him. I almost want to say he's morally gray, but he is not morally gray. He's just bad. He is just a really, really, I don't want to say he's bad. No, he's not bad. He is just a really crazy person, but he has like a good heart at the same time. Like he's trying to enact these good things in the world. It's just that he's going about it in such a bad way. Thank you all so much for watching. Y'all take care. I'll see y'all for the next one.